Greetings, VC. I'm TC Kirkham, TKR Video Central and the Kirkham Report. This show is going to be about labels, those that were or have been known to produce a few hits, but that didn't last very long. They shone brightly for a brief period of time and then kind of sparked out of existence, which is where the name of the show comes from. It's called Labelnova. I've been trying to get this thing off the ground for 6 months, and hopefully you guys will help me out with it, because this show is a show in progress. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like to find out. Let me know what you'd like to hear or how you'd like to see the show formatted. It is a historical perspective show, and I would really like your input. So please leave a comment or email me at the address in the show notes. I'd be glad to take in what you have to say. We're going to start off with one of my favorite labels, excuse me, of the 1970s. It was a small label that lasted for about 6 years, and it was actually, no, that's wrong, 5 years. And it did really well out of the box with one big hit, and then had a few other minor hits along the way. And the rest of it, well, you'll see. It was founded by a man that was well respected as one of the top songwriters, producers, and musicians in the entire industry. His name was Wes Farrell, and he became known as a songwriter when he started off in the Brill Building. He was a New York City boy, born and bred, and he was a songwriter at the Brill Building. He helped Neil Diamond get his very first publishing contract, and he helped out with all kinds of songs. And prior to 1967, he was best known for writing the McCoys' #1 smash, Hang On Sloopy. It was based on an earlier smash he had co-written with someone else, or an earlier song that he'd co-written with someone else. In 1967, he took his first stab at producing a few tracks for the family act known as the Cowsills. But he really gained fame when he became a major songwriter and a producer on one of the top shows of television at the time that was based on that real-life musical family. The show was called The Partridge Family. Wes served as a producer, as a songwriter. He wrote some of their biggest hits, including co-writing Doesn't Somebody Want to Be Wanted and I'll Meet You Halfway, among others, 30 in all. He also had done all kinds of things, and later on in his career, he would start Coral Rock Productions, which was his production company. He also started an ad company that specialized in writing commercial jingles. But in 1972, after getting frustrated with his friends in the music industry, who would not even entertain the idea of releasing a song he loved by one of his favorite singers and friends, he decided to start his own label. It was called Chelsea Records. I always loved the look of the label. Chelsea, this wonderful pink and yellow, and later on it's blue and yellow and green. Chelsea was out there from 1972 to 1977 officially, although I have 1978 in my slideshow because Wikipedia or Discogs has one final single coming out in 1978, so that's why it's included. He started off big. That very first single, the song that everybody else turned down, and he released the first major release on Chelsea Records, became a #4 smash and an instant comeback hit for Wayne Newton. Daddy Don't You Walk So Fast was Chelsea's first big hit, and over the next several years they would produce a number of other ones. Most memorably, 1975's Sky High by Jigsaw. That's the label's biggest hit. It's an interesting mix of people that were appearing. But for all intents and purposes, although Wes was a great singer, or a great songwriter and producer, I'm not so sure he was great at label A&R because he signed a lot of acts that just didn't go anywhere. Yes, Wayne Newton had a big comeback hit with Daddy Don't You Walk So Fast, but most of his follow-ups missed the chart. A songwriter and singer named Austin Roberts had a couple of hits, Something's Wrong with Me and Keep On Singin', the latter of which would later become an even bigger hit for Helen Reddy a year later. Austin gained his biggest hit on Private Stock Records, another label we'll talk about in this show later on, with his 1975 hit Rocky. There was also Disco Tex and his Sexolettes. Had a couple of big disco hits in 1975. The aforementioned Jigsaw, and a few other people in between. But some of the acts that he signed, I really actually hadn't gone into the history of this until I started thinking about doing this show. And I went and I found clips for some of the songs. We're going to play some of them, and I got to admit, some of the stuff is good, and it should have been a hit, and it wasn't. Some of the stuff is really bad, and it deserved not to be a hit. This is also another one I had trouble finding clips for a couple of songs I wanted to use. I had trouble finding Delta Queen by Don Fardin. Now, that actually barely hit the Hot 100. I think it peaked at number 83 when I looked it up. But I remember hearing that song on the local radio station in Columbus, Ohio when I was a kid. And there was also Friends from Johnny Whitaker. Johnny was the star of Sigmund and the Sea Monsters at the time. Of course, he'd gotten his big fame from Family Affair back in the 60s. But that Friends song was released as a single. It was the theme from Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. Couldn't find a good clip of that one either, even though it actually did get some airplay. It wasn't a chart hit. In fact, most of the stuff they had weren't big chart hits. Some of them, a couple of Wayne Newtons registered in the lower reaches of the Hot 100 and maybe on the Adult Contemporary / Easy Listening chart. But as this show is going to focus strictly on the pop chart, he didn't do that well. One song that did really well for Chelsea wasn't on Chelsea proper, but it was on their sublabel, Roxbury Records. Roxbury was the part of the label that handled R&B, and William DeVaughn's Be Thankful for What You Got became a number 4 hit in the spring of 1974. I still remember grooving along with that song. It was a really great, one of those early slow jam songs that you just can't get away with. It has slight disco beat underneath it. Disco hadn't really taken off yet. And it was a great song. I also find it interesting that Farrell, who hailed from New York City, named 2 record labels after suburbs of Boston. So much for that rivalry between Boston and New York City. Chelsea is right next to Boston on its north side and right next to us here in Revere. Roxbury is south of town. It's actually technically part of Boston proper, but it is is considered a suburb all its own and has its own zip code and everything else. I thought that was an interesting thing, considering the rivalry that goes on between New York City and Boston all the time, mostly because of the Red Sox and the Yankees. In any case, I put together a slideshow of some of the songs, all the big hits, a little bit of information about them, and some of the other stuff that I found along the way. Now, they had over 100 songs. I'm not going to do all the songs from any of the labels, but I'm going to do stuff that stands out to me or stuff that I find is interesting. Your mileage may vary on those interesting ones. If you've heard some of them that, aren't bigger hits, let me know. I'm curious to see if they got any radio play in your area. And without further ado, let's hear some of the songs that made Chelsea Records everything it was from 1972 to 1978.
Daddy for a long, long time. I only wanna make it with you. He said, keep on singing, don't stop singing. You're gonna be a star someday. You're gonna make a lot of people happy when they come to hear you play. He'd say, keep on singing, keep the bells a-ringing, spread your music from town to town. There's not enough love in this old world, so spread your songs around. Oh girl, I'm doing fine now without you, baby. I'm doing fine now without you, baby. Remember the day you walked away. I ran.
Just be thankful for what you got. Though you may not drive a great big Cadillac, diamond in the back, sunroof top, digging the scene with a gangster lean, gangster white walls, TV antennas in the back.
Machine gun rap and locomotive, get dancing, dancing.
to who knows where. People try to please you, girl, but you don't even care. Everybody's found you out, they know you're
Lucinda Lee, won't you pass some time with me? 'Cause there's some things that you're needing to know now that you've spent 20 years learning something else about that awful reason why. If I cross my old heart now, sure to die, baby, you know I'm a man of my word, but I sometimes lie. You're down in Louisiana, way down in Louisiana. Well, I had no luck. I had a pickup truck. I had a one-eyed mule named Sam. I had a one-eyed mule. I had a one-eyed mule. Driving a Hovis down Louisiana. Driving a Hovis down. Driving a Hovis. us down.
Mystified to the death of the flowers and sing, dying river rolling home. Through the cities turned to stone, the dying river rolls alone.
I miss the hungry years, the once upon a time, the lovely long ago we didn't have a dime. Those days of me and you, we lost along the way.
I wanna believe in this one. I wanna believe in this one so bad. I wanna believe in this one. I wanna believe in this dream so bad. Got this dream in my head, found it in to face.
So there you go. Some of the releases on Chelsea, of course, all the big hits there. I remember all the big hits. They all got radio play where I lived. I remember the one that probably got the least amount was Keep On Singing, although I do remember hearing it a couple of times. But of course, that version was overshadowed by Helen Reddy's monster hit of the song about a year and 18 months later. And Austin Roberts was always a favorite song of mine. I actually played Something's Wrong With Me on Obscuria about a year ago. And he has some great stuff. I have 2 or 3 of his albums, and he's a pretty good singer-songwriter. But some of these other ones, just because I didn't put it in the notes, if you'd like me to add notes about it like I do on Obscuria, let me know that too, please. I can do those after I give you the title and the artist. Peggy Klinger, one half of Symbol and Klinger, is the older sister of Debbie Klinger, who played Super Chick in the Captain Cool and the Kongs on the Croft Super Show back in the 70s. Johnny Symbol, her partner there, had a number of hits of his own in the 60s. Marjo, otherwise known as Marjo Gortner, was, of course, a child evangelist and later completely distanced himself from that, saying his parents had forced him into it. He became a rather well-known actor and television host. He did some great stuff. He's terrific in Earthquake, where he plays the bad guy, but he's also equally not so great in Star Crash, which is one of the worst movies of all time. There's also the early stuff from Daryl Hall. Now, despite that album cover, that was a solo number released by Daryl Hall, although John Oates is credited as the guitar player on the song. They were already working together at that time, but there was several solo things done by Daryl Hall on Chelsea before, in between their success with earlier stuff like She's Gone and then Sarah Smile. Of course, She's Gone was a bigger hit after Sarah Smile. Atlantic re-released it. None of the Chelsea stuff took off, though. It'll be an interesting look back, because I remember Chelsea being a part of my childhood. I had the Austin Roberts album, I think right shortly after it came out. I played it all the time. I still love it. It's a great soft rock, yacht rock type of music. And Wayne Newton, for all of his all of the jokes that are made about Wayne Newton, he is a truly consummate performer. By the time Daddy Don't You Walk So Fast came out, he'd been in the business already for nearly 15 years. He had his big break in 1960 when he first started performing, and in 1962 he was all of 21 when Donkashane hit big. From that point on, he was a pretty big star, but he hadn't had a big hit since 1965 when Daddy Don't You Walk So Fast broke and turned him into a top 10 artist, and that is what gave him the real push in Las Vegas, where he became known as the King of Las Vegas, because he performed something like 40 weeks a year at the hotel he was a co-owner, which I forget which one it is. He was performing enormously until he cut way back in the mid-2010s. And, of course, he's no longer a young man. He's pushing 80, but he's still performing. And that says something about the guy. So, what do you remember about Chelsea Records? Do you have any Chelsea records? Do you have any things that I didn't mention here at any of these? Because there's quite a few things that came out on Chelsea that I didn't get around to mentioning. But it's an interesting thing. Those Rick Springfield albums, Rick Springfield actually was re-released. The Wait for Night album, the only album he recorded for Chelsea, was reissued in 1983 after his success with Jesse's Girl. It was issued on the Chelsea Records label, so whoever owned it, I think RCA owned it at the time, released it again, and it is in my collection. It's actually a really good album. All of Rick's stuff was good in the 70s before he really took off in the 1980s, and all of his more recent stuff has been really good too, even though you never hear him on the radio anymore. He does look a bit weird with white hair, but you know, hey, we're all getting old, aren't we? So let me know if I've missed something. If you remember hearing Don Farden's Delta Queen, I couldn't find a clip of it that was usable. I tried several different clips, just didn't sound very good. or any of the other Chelsea songs, let me know, because I'd like to hear about it. I'd also like to know what labels you'd like to see me do. Now, the rules are simple. They have to be a label that existed for less than 10 years. They had to have a meteoric rise to the top and a slow but gradual downfall, and eventually either a big explosion of death or a poof explosion. I don't care. Before we get into this, I will tell you that I am planning to do Casablanca and RSO, two huge labels in the 70s that basically self-destructed overnight in the early 80s. Each of those will be more than one show, trust me, because there are so much. They had such success in the 70s. Casablanca with Disco, Kiss, Cher, and a few other people, and RSO mostly with the Bee Gees, but also with Saturday Night Fever, Grease, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band soundtracks. It'll be interesting to see what we do. And I also am planning to do Private Stock and a few others, and some of the other labels that you see flashing by in the opening credits. In any case, I'd love to hear from you about what you'd like me to do on this show and what you'd like to see and what kind of history you'd like on each label. It's not always great to put together. There was a great book that came out back in the 80s, and it was kept up until the early 2000s. And I think it was called Stax O Wax. And I wrote a few years ago, last time I found them online, seeing if I could still get it, and I never heard back from them. I'd still like to get that book because it basically lists every 45 single released from 1948 through whenever they ended in chronological order. So I'd really like to see that and get a hold of that and add it to my research collection. But if you know where I might be able to find one of those, let me know. In any case, I hope you liked the history of Chelsea Records. Wes Farrell was an amazing songwriter. A lot of his songs from the Partridge Family are very close to my heart. I'm a big fan of that show, big fan of the music. That was a big part of my life when I was 6, 7, and 8 years old. And he did good with this and a few hits, and I wish they'd had better success. A couple of those. I'm surprised Lulu didn't do better on her release as a Chelsea, because they were just as good as her 60s stuff, but she would not hit the chart again until 1981 in America, so I guess fate wasn't with her. But I hope you guys will be here for the next edition of Labelnova. If you haven't subscribed to me yet, please do, and if you have, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Please don't forget to share. I am always looking for more people to check out my stuff, and by all means, leave a comment and or email. My email is in the show notes every week, and I definitely love to hear from you. And like I said, on this particular show, I'm looking for ideas and what kind of format you'd like and everything else. Whatever you'd like, however you'd like this show to feel, let me know, because I want to know. I hope you enjoyed the debut, and we'll see you in 2 weeks with another edition of Labelnova. I'm TC Kirkham, TKR Video Central, and the Kirkham Report. Ciao, baby.